Russia, the biggest country on Earth. With such a big place, there's bound to be some very scary stories that have emerged there over the years. These are some of the very best. Coming at number 10 now, we have the Russian sleep experiment. Some of you guys may have heard of this one before. It became a very popular creepypasta a few years ago, and for good reason. According to the legend, Russian scientists in the 1940s took 5 prison inmates and locked them in an airtight chamber with a special gas inside that made them unable to sleep. They wanted to study the effects of sleep deprivation over 30 days. On day 5, the inmates stopped talking to each other. By day 9, some of them were screaming, begging to get out. One of the others tore apart the books they were given, smeared them with their own feces, and then covered the one-way mirror with it, which the scientists were using to observe them. Then the screaming stopped. By day 15, they announced over the intercom that they were coming in. A voice replied, "We no longer want to be freed." They opened up the chamber to find one of the inmates had just been torn to pieces by the others. They had also mutilated themselves almost to the point of death. The team tried to surgically reverse the damage on their brains, but they resisted and couldn't be sedated. They just kept laughing and laughing. They demanded to be let back into the chamber, which the head scientist then agreed to. Appalled at what he was seeing, one of the scientists shot the head scientist and the remaining subjects. Before killing the last one, he asked, "What are you?" The prisoner responded, "Have you forgotten so easily? We are you. We are the madness that lurks within you all, begging to be free at every moment in your deepest animal mind. We are what you hide from in your beds every night. We are what you sedate into silence and paralyze when you go to the nocturnal haven where we cannot tread." The scientist fired the gun and killed him. Moving on to number 9 now, we have the legend of Brosnya. The Brosnya is said to be an ancient mythological beast that lives within the waterways of the Adriapol district. Perhaps the closest comparison to this for a Western audience would be the Loch Ness Monster. The Brosnya lurks below the surface there. Many have heard of it, but few have seen it. They describe it as a prehistoric creature with a dragon's head and long thin tail. There have been accounts of the beast going back well over 1,000 years. One notable example involves a Mongol army in the 8th century that fled the area after the Brosnya attacked them, eating their soldiers and horses. Some even say it's related to the Loch Ness Monster. Wouldn't that be an interesting family reunion? Coming out number 8 now, we have Ivan Vassili. That's the name of a ship, not a person. It was built in St. Petersburg in 1897. Everything was fine with the ship for about 25 years, and then in 1903 something changed. The crew were in the Indian Ocean one day when they felt a strange presence, almost as if an invisible entity was watching over them. There was a chill in the air. One night they saw an apparition, a human figure that strolled across the deck, its features too blurry to make out, and it then disappeared behind a lifeboat. A few nights later, when the ship was docked in China, a crew member screamed out into the night, sending everyone into a crazy panic. They lost their minds and went berserk, beating each other and themselves. It only ended when one of the crew members threw himself overboard and died. A few days later, it happened again. The crew became possessed with this fighting rage, and only ended with another crew member's death by drowning. The crew abandoned ship at port. The new crew set sail, but the same thing happened to them. This time 4 people died, including the captain, all of them throwing themselves overboard. Eventually the crew burned down the ship, cheering at the sight as they left in smaller boats. Next up at number 7 now, we have the Well to Hell. This one comes from Siberia, a part of Russia that's perhaps one of the most inhospitable places on Earth. You'll rarely find people here, which is why a lot of stories have sprouted up around it. According to legend, a scientific team were drilling a hole to study samples in the Siberian permafrost. Suddenly, the drill started malfunctioning and letting off intense heat from below. Then they heard faint noises coming from within the hole. They scrambled to get a microphone and began feeding it down the hole so that they could hear better. They realized the noises were actually human voices coming from deep in the ground, and they were screaming out in pain. The terrified team packed up right away and left, convinced they had found a well to hell. Moving on to number 6 now, we have the Black Volga. This one comes from the height of the Cold War during the 1960s and 70s. During that time, many Russians talked of a Black Volga, an expensive car usually driven by those high up in the Soviet government. They said this particular car would appear out of nowhere. Its side mirrors were actually horns, and it would steal children from the side of the road, never to be seen again. What's more, some say the car was driven by the devil himself. For me, though, the scariest part of the story is yet to come. It was said that those who doubted this story's authenticity would just be dead within 24 hours. Of course, this only made the story spread even faster. Do you guys dare doubt its authenticity? At number 5 now, we have Snake Lubac. Some Russians believe that occasionally a shooting star falling to Earth may actually be a Snake Lubac, a demonic figure that resembles a giant snake. It's often called the Fiery Serpent due to its fiery descent to Earth in a huge ball of fire. After it lands and the dust settles, the Snake Lubac takes on human form. To be more specific, it takes on the form of a lost love that died to whomever it appears in front of. It chooses people who are desperate to see their partner one last time. The Snake Lubac then tricks the person into believing that they never died at all. Once the person is totally under its spell, it slowly convinces them to commit suicide, a fate which many say is unavoidable. At number 4 now, we have the Chernobyl Blackbird. I'm sure many of you guys have heard about the Chernobyl disaster, the nuclear power plant meltdown that happened in 1986, leaving a large part of the Soviet Union uninhabitable because of radiation. Now, according to some of the locals who lived nearby, there were signs of the disaster coming beforehand. Some of them experienced nightmares, strange phone calls, and encounters with a huge winged monster they called the Blackbird of Chernobyl. Apparently it looked like a twisted hybrid of bird and human, with huge wings and big red eyes. Some even say they saw it flying over the reactors during the meltdown. Is it just some stupid story, or does this creature warn people of impending doom, or perhaps even cause it? Coming at number 3 now, we have UVB76, also known as the Buzzer. This is the nickname given to a shortwave radio station that broadcasts a short, monotonous buzzing noise all day, every day, and has been doing it since 1973, 45 years ago. Nobody knows why this exists or where this creepy station is. Sometimes the buzzer signal is interrupted by a Russian voice that reads out a string of random phrases and numbers. The message usually starts with UVB76. When the message stops, the buzzing begins again, sometimes continuing for years. Theories for this have ranged from military communications to a way to announce a nuclear war has begun. At number 2 now, we have the Collector. In old Russian folklore, the Collector is a strange, dark figure who kidnaps people, kills them, and then puts their mummified bodies on display for his own pleasure. If that sounds too disturbing to be true, then think again. Russians were shocked in 2011 to learn that there was a real-life version of the Collector that had been arrested. He used to dig up corpses and dress their remains in women's clothing to display around his home. In total, he did this with an astounding 29 corpses. If there's anything worse than an urban legend, it's a real one coming to life. And finally, at number 1 now, we have Baba Yaga. Everyone I spoke to about this video told me to include Baba Yaga, and for good reason. According to Russian folklore, she is a supernatural being who appears as a deformed old woman. She flies around in a giant mortar while using the pestle to steer. Deep in the Russian woods, she lives in a log cabin that moves around on a pair of chicken legs. The keyhole to her door is filled with sharp teeth. The fence outside is made with human bones topped with skulls. She always leaves one empty though. For you. She is said to kidnap children and threaten to eat them. An emphasis is placed on the need for proper preparation of purity or spirit when meeting her, as well as politeness. This creepy being is said to have good qualities at times, but for many Russians who grew up hearing about her, Baba Yaga is always something to avoid, especially in the woods at night. Starting off at number 10 now, we have the Red Piano. The story goes like this. A little girl who wanted to play the piano got one on her birthday from her parents. She excitedly practiced for weeks on it, but one day her fingertips began to hurt. She was told this was totally normal and just bruising from over practice. If she kept going, then her fingers would get used to the pressure. The girl continued to practice, but it began to take its toll on her physically. She grew thinner and paler every single day. After a month of this, the piano broke. The only person in the town who could fix it was an old woman. When she arrived, she told the parents and the girl they needed to stay out of the room as she worked on the piano, as she didn't want any distractions. After a while she emerged. The piano was fixed. The girl went back to practicing, but after a few more days she became so weak again that she could barely walk across the room. The piano had broken again. The old lady arrived and again told them to leave while she worked. The parents were curious though about how she fixed the piano, and so they looked into the room through the keyhole. They saw the old lady open the piano and take a glass jar out filled with what looked like blood. Then she started to drink it. The parents called the police straight away, who came and arrested the old lady. They examined the piano and found that the piano keys had tiny needles built into them, so small they were practically invisible to the naked eye. As the girl played the piano, she suffered tiny cuts which drained her blood drop by drop into the jar. The piano was designed to break when the jar was full so that the old lady could come and drink her fill. Next up at number 9 now, we have Koschei the Deathless. In Russian folklore, this evil being is known as the kidnapper of brides. He is said to look like a skeleton wrapped in a thin, transparent film of skin. He resides in limbo between the world of the living and the world of the dead. He appears in stories throughout Russia as a sorcerer with endless wealth, kidnapping girls to be his wives. In one tale, he turned an entire kingdom into a rock and another its people into frogs. He is also blind, and in order to see his enemies, he asks his servants to lift up his withered eyelids. He is seen by some as part of marital initiation. A bride may only marry once her groom has defeated this twisted being. Next up at number 8 now, we have the yellow curtains. One day, a family of 4 moved into a new house which needed curtains. As they went to go and buy them, they remembered their recently deceased grandma hated yellow curtains and always told them to never ever get them, even after her death. Of course, as they walked around the market, all they saw was yellow curtains. After searching and searching for something else, they gave up and finally bought them. They brought them home and put them up in the room where the little boy and girl lives. That night the curtains began moving and woke the boy up. Then they started talking. "Hey boy, get up," they said. The boy got up. "Hey boy, go wash your face and eat breakfast." They continued. The boy did as he was told. "Hey boy, come to the window and see how your grandma's hanging up the laundry outside." The boy was puzzled but approached the window. At that exact moment, the curtains grabbed him and threw him out of the window as the entire family slept. Then the curtains did the exact same thing to the girl. Police investigators found hairs on the curtains and tracked down the old lady who had sold them the curtains. The old lady broke down and said she would help. She said the only thing these curtains were scared of was a magic scalpel hidden inside the giant star on top of the Kremlin. The police retrieved this scalpel and took it to the curtains, where they went to cut a piece of it off for examination. No sooner had the scalpel touched the curtains than they exploded. No trace of them was ever found. Moving on to number 7 now, we have the coffin on wheels. This story starts off with the little girl's mother, who was very ill. In her final days, she told her daughter that if she died, the girl should never paint her nails with red varnish. The mother died, and in the girl's grief, she dismissed what her mother had told her. She thought it was just the illness talking. After some time, the girl completely forgot her mother's warning and painted her nails red one day. As she finished, the radio flickered on and a demonic voice said, "Hey, little girl, remove the varnish from your nails. A coffin on wheels has found your town and is looking for your street." The girl was confused and thought it just must be a glitch. She turned the TV on, but the same voice came out instantly. "Hey, little girl, the coffin on wheels has found your street and is looking for your house. Take off your nail polish." Terrified, the girl scrubbed her nail polish off and rushed to the phone to call her friend. Instead of her friend's voice though, she heard the same voice. "Hey, little girl, the coffin on wheels is at your house. Now it's looking for your door. Take off your nail polish." She threw the phone down and kept trying to scrub, but the polish wouldn't come off. She heard a knock at the door, but couldn't see anyone through the peephole. She opened the door, and there was the coffin on wheels. It slowly opened, and her mother stepped out. "Why didn't you listen to me?" she screamed. This story alone has kept the scary legend of the coffin on wheels alive. Next up at number 6 now, we have the Old Woman of Ostankino. This legend is of a ghostly figure who is said to appear in the Ostankino district of Moscow. It's not a new legend either. The ghost of this old woman has been appearing to people for over 5 centuries. Other than appearing to ordinary Russians, she is said to appear to powerful Russian leaders to warn them of coming danger. She would share insight on coming plagues or even foreign invaders. All she asks for in return is that they never farm the land on which she appears on. Legend says that one leader didn't listen to her and ordered that the land be farmed on. The old woman called up the spirits that occupied the land and made them possess the local people, driving them to insanity. It's been years since then, but some locals say she is still capable of doing the same. Moving on to number 5 now, we have Metro 2. This legend says that the Soviet Union constructed a secret metro system underneath Moscow. It was apparently ordered by Joseph Stalin and and said to be connected directly to the Kremlin. The secret government usage is just the tip of the iceberg though. Many locals swear that strange hybrid human creatures lurk down there, the product of experiments in Soviet labs that were deemed too hideous to ever be seen by the public. Sympathetic scientists released these creatures into the hidden metro in the hopes they could live out somewhat of a normal life. For a while the public didn't believe the stories of people seeing these creatures scuttling out from the ground, but then several Soviet Union defectors came forward and swore the whole thing was real. Now many urban explorers are constantly on the hunt for Metro 2 and its mutant inhabitants. Next up at number 4 now we have the black curtains. One day a girl's mother sent her to the store to buy some curtains for the house. She told her to not get black ones. Any other colour or type will do, but not black ones. Naturally, the shop the girl went to only had black curtains in stock. The girl decided to get them as they are surely better than no curtains anyway. The mother was not happy but agreed to put them up. The next morning the family woke up to find that the father had been in the night. The night after, the same thing happened to the girl's mother and brother. The police arrived and decided to set up a trap for whoever this mysterious was. They hid inside the house as the girl went to bed. In the dead of night they began to see the black curtains stretching, twisting and turning. The police bust out and fired their guns at the curtains. The curtains let out a demonic screech as the bullets ripped through the black fabric, letting out a foul black liquid where blood should be. Then they fell to the floor, motionless. The girl survived. This story has left some people with a deep superstition of black curtains, maybe just to be safe. Next up at number 3 now we have the haunted Kremlin. The Kremlin is the fortified hub of Moscow and has been the seat of Russia's leadership for many years. It was first built in the 15th century and in the years since then it's built up a reputation for being incredibly haunted. People say the ghosts of former leaders still wander the corridors, doomed to haunt because of unfinished business in life. One example is Nicholas II, who appears before a Russian disaster occurs. Ivan the Terrible has been seen in the shadows and on the bell tower. Now they say he can't find peace as a ghost because he killed his own son, a deed that still haunts him in his afterlife. Even the famous Soviet leader Lenin is sighted at the Kremlin. What's even creepier is that his ghost was actually seen by several people even when he was still alive, but it was apparently unable to move, almost as if it was waiting for him to die. That's exactly what happened though, just 3 months later after the first sighting. Moving on to number 2 now, we have the Black Tram. One day a little boy in a small town was on his way home from school. It was a route he had done many times before, but for some reason on this day he found himself in an area he just didn't recognize. The streets were unfamiliar and empty, lined with different buildings and trees. The strangest thing was just how dark it was, even though it was daytime just minutes before. He saw a tram stop and decided to hop on one, hoping to get to somewhere he knew. The board with the routes on was strange though. Each tram was numbered with years. One said 1932 to 1958, another said 1983 to 1995. They reminded him of dates on a gravestone. Then a tram began rolling towards the stop. It was very old looking and moved almost silently. It was also a deep jet black in colour, like a hearse. As it came to a stop and the doors opened, the boy felt something pull him inside, like a gust of wind pushing him forwards. He shook it off and stepped back onto the street. Suddenly the black tram was gone. He looked around and found himself on a lively street that he knew quite well. As he walked home, he suddenly remembered that the tram's number had been his birth year and the current year was next to it, flickering, waiting for him to step inside. Some people believe that the black trams are responsible for people's disappearances, pulling them in unless they have the willpower to fight back and live another day. And finally, number 1 now, we have the Golosov Ravine. This is a park in Moscow which is known to the people there as being built around very ancient stones said to be sacred and pure. Perhaps that's the reason the ravine has been home to many strange legends over the years. One of them tells of a group of Mongol soldiers who entered the ravine to explore it. A cloud of mist emerged and got thicker around them as they moved further into the ravine until it completely surrounded them. The soldiers left the ravine a few minutes later and found the land unrecognizable. 100 years had somehow passed. Locals believe that on these misty days the Golosov Ravine becomes a sort of time portal. They say that explains the disappearances that have happened to people there ever since. People say they're not gone for good and one day they will emerge in the future from the ravine as if no time had passed for them at all. Starting off at number 10 now, we have dwarf nose. Some of you may have heard me talk about candle love. In a series of posts on an internet forum, a person started a new thread by asking about a TV show called Candle Love. Some people remembered it and were shocked that they ever forgot it. It was a twisted show that was disguised as a children's TV show. It started as a normal looking pirate puppet show, but eventually morphed into something much creepier. If you haven't heard of it, check it out. If you have, well, it turns out that Russia may have its very own version, and it's called Dwarf Knows. Over the years, a number of Russians have stated that the Soviet Union once broadcast a creepy, disturbing film on television at night. No record of the film has ever been found, and skeptics believe the film never actually existed in the first place. According to the legend though, there are some people who are hell-bent on finding a copy of the mysterious film they saw, otherwise they are sure that they must have gone mad. Once they find it, their next aim is to find out why the movie aired in the first place and why the government now wants to cover it up. Next up at number 9 now, we have Vladimir LEDENEV. In 2007, the body of Vladimir LEDENEV was discovered in his home after not being seen for almost 7 years. He was discovered in a sitting position, his arm leaning on the kitchen table, his head was slumped over. There was an empty vodka bottle and a glass sat in front of him. His neighbours reported that the 68-year-old had vanished without a trace over 6 years ago. They thought he'd moved somewhere else or checked himself into a hospital as he had been diagnosed with tuberculosis. They told police that he had started drinking heavily after his mother passed away 10 years prior. They told investigators that although people had tried to get in contact with him when he first disappeared, eventually all inquiries stopped and he was pretty much forgotten. The discovery of his body was finally made by workers at a house management office as they made their rounds in the apartments of those who owed unpaid bills. Moving on to number 8 now guys, we have the mystery craters. In July 2014, a mysterious hole appeared in the permafrost of Siberia. It was spotted by helicopter pilots in the remote Yamal region and soon captured the world's attention. Reindeer herders reported a second hole a few days later, and then finally a third one was found. What was going on with these massive holes in the ground? Why were these gaping holes appearing in the earth when just months before there was absolutely nothing? While researchers tried to figure out what exactly was going on, the internet was abound with rumours. Legends began to stir. Some claimed that the holes were actually long forgotten Soviet era experiments. They said that during the Cold War, the Soviets were experimenting with a terrible power, the power to make the very ground itself swallow people, towns and cities whole. They said that the experiment was cut short before completion, and those holes were the remnants of the work activated by accident all these years later. Now scientists have suggested that the holes have actually been created by ice melting and releasing methane, but that doesn't really make for a good urban legend, does it? Next up at number 7 now, we have ELENA and ALEXEY. The story goes that in 1942, ELENA was a beautiful woman who was engaged to ALEXEY, a young man who worked at a chemical plant. Tragically, a chemical fire ripped through the plant one day, killing ALEXEY just days before their marriage. In her grief, ELENA threw herself in front of a train wearing her long white gown made for her wedding day by her grandmother. ELENA was buried in the municipal cemetery. 10 years later, locals began seeing ELENA roaming around the cemetery and walking along the tracks where she died. They say that she is looking for ALEXEY and cannot rest until she finds him. As we know from the story though, ALEXEY died at the chemical plant, or perhaps his spirit passed on unimpeded, which is more than we can say for the grief-stricken ELENA. Next up at number 6 now, we have RUSALKA. In Slavic mythology, the RUSALKA is a fish woman, a sort of dark succubus if you like. They are women who have died violently before their time. If they're women, they've been jilted by their lovers, have been born out of wedlock, or murdered by those most dear to them. They are said to be most dangerous to men and like to seduce them by singing to them and then wrapping their arms around them to pull them down into the water and drown them. Obviously, they are dangerous, there's no denying that, but many people believe they can do good. They are said to have control over the fertility of living things near them, and some control over the seasons. Some people believe they're a pretty good thing to have around. Moving on to number 5 now, we have Lieutenant SCHMIDTS Bridge. This bridge is a well-known landmark in St. Petersburg and has become the source of many paranormal tales over the years. Locals have reported seeing a thin young lady walk along the bridge and always complain about her misfortunes. On the other side of the river, another young woman has been known to appear out of thin air and weep bitterly. Nobody has ever stuck around long enough to ask her why though. Legend says though that she is the spirit of Princess Tarakanova, who tried to claim the throne from Catherine the Great and was imprisoned in a nearby fortress for her crimes. Next up at the number 4 spot now, we have the Church of the Saviour on Blood. This temple is one of the most famous pieces of architecture in in Russia. From the outside, it's clearly a thing of beauty. On the inside though, this beauty makes way for a darker mystery. People from all over the world have obsessed over the hidden secrets within its walls. Some say that it has icons and engravings on the walls and hidden under its roof that seem to have predicted future events in Russia's history. The legend goes that an icon under the roof has a few numbers on them. One of them is 1917, 1917, the year of the Russian Revolution. Another is 1941, the year that Hitler invaded the Soviet Union. It's believed that the icon has power and is able to predict these monumental events in the history of Russia. They say it will do this for future events too, that if a tragedy is approaching Russia one day, the icon will show silhouettes and dates as a warning of what is to come. Coming in at number 3 now, we have the Blazing Orb. In 2013, the Chelyabinsk meteor was a 66-foot asteroid that broke up in Earth's atmosphere over Russia. It created a light brighter than the sun and a shockwave that smashed windows for miles around. The town of Chelyabinsk was right under the path of the asteroid and experienced some strange phenomena soon after the event. People reported seeing a glowing fog come down from the sky above, followed by a giant blazing orb. Meteorologists suggested that this may have just been the result of street lights reflecting off ice crystals, but others weren't so convinced. They believed it was too much of a coincidence for this to happen at the same time as this close call with the meteor. Aliens? Aliens. It's gotta be aliens, right?
Нифига. Охренеть нафиг.
Moving on to number 2 now, we have A Change of Weather. This is the story of Sofia Porovskaya. She was a member of a radical group within the Socialist Party at the start of the 20th century. She carried out assassination attempts on the royal family and government officials. Now because of this, she was sentenced to death by hanging for her crimes against the state. In the years since, a bit of a legend has built up over the years that's linked to the story of Sofia. Locals say that when the weather turns bad in March, Sofia will appear on the bridge over the Ekaterinitsky Channel. Her face will look blue from the suffocation of her execution. There will also be a purple trace on her neck from rope burns. Some even say she carries a white handkerchief in her hand, signaling to her comrades to start the revolution. And finally, number 1 now, we have the Brosno monster. Essentially, this story is like the Russian version of the Loch Ness monster. 250 miles northwest of Moscow, near Andriopol in West Russia, lies the small body of water known as Lake Brosno. Since 1854, locals have sworn it is home to a large glowing reptilian creature. It's been described as 16 feet long, an iridescent dragon-like creature with a fish-like or serpentine head. It's said to have spread terror throughout the small fishing communities along that lake. This sort of bioluminescent creature is rare, even among urban legends. The scientists who have theorized about its possible existence have often insisted that the creature cannot be a reptile due to the frigid conditions up there. Either way, some locals now live in total fear. One old woman was quoted as saying, "I'm afraid, I do not feel comfortable staying in this place. The monster could crawl into my house any day." Honestly, I've got huge respect for her if she ends up staying there. Imagine having to worry every single day if a monster is going to crawl out of a nearby lake and right into your home. No thanks.